Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the co-owner and creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video, I'm going to talk to you about fearful avoidant attachment style and counterdependency. So I'm doing a little series on this and how this impacts different attachment styles. And for the anxious preoccupied, I'll specifically focus more on codependency. But just to give you a little bit of a background on what counterdependency is, it's basically the refusal or denial, avoidance even, of attachment based on the fear of emotional closeness, but to the point where where it becomes really counterproductive. So what this is actually born of, believe it or not, is the fear of abandonment. And what happens for the fearful avoidance so much in childhood is that they often get programmed with love equals pain, or love equals a lack of safety or challenge or difficulty or unpredictability or enmeshment or me being unseen and unheard and being expected to give of myself. And based on the negative associations that get programmed in, these are then competing with the positive associations, those natural inborn desires for attachment, for connection, for closeness. And that intensity of the programmed associations versus the natural associations that we come into the world with can cause a lot of challenge and inner turmoil. And so a fearful avoidant, for example, can get really afraid of having closeness, but feel like they seek it or yearn for it at the same time. So we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into how this comes about and what you can start doing about it, especially if you are the fearful avoidant experiencing this, because it can be really challenging. And the counterdependent behavior that you have, or if you actually fall into the category of being counterdependent because of the pervasiveness of that behavior, it can be really challenging because at a deeper level, usually you want closeness. You don't want to have to be so independent. You want to be able to rely on others. And if you feel like it's unsafe at some level and you feel like you're protecting yourself or, taking your power back by carving out a space for yourself to not be this way, that can be coming from a place of woundedness more than true independence. And it can also be a block towards a healthy interdependence, which is a natural and important part of our social relationships and personal well-being. So I'm going to dive into this. Before I start, we are doing a sale to support our community. We're offering 25% off of membership bundles for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. The coupon code I'll put in here, it's with you, all one word. And also, I will be speaking at a really exciting summit with a whole bunch of basically like leading experts on relationships. It'll be June 20th at 4 p.m. Eastern and June 21st at around the same time, a little bit later in the day. And what I will do is I will put a link here as well for that summit. And it's free. And it's like a whole bunch of people coming together and sharing a whole bunch of really incredible stuff. And I will be co-hosting it with Joel Brown, who's the founder of the Addicted to Success platform. And he's just a really, really beautiful and great human being. And so he's sort of organizing this. Anyways, I'll put details so you guys can check it out in the link here on the video. So let's go back into this for a moment. So here's what happens for the fearful avoidant. A lot of fearful avoidance, it's very common. It's actually very uncommon that this isn't a part of fearful avoidant conditioning. They either directly, through their direct experiences, get enmeshed with their caregivers or become enmeshed indirectly because they see their caregivers in pain. And because they're hyper attuned to them, they see their caregivers maybe depressed or anxious or going through a challenging time in their lives. And they don't like the way that that feels. And so they start taking on the feelings, worrying about the parent or caregiver's feelings, trying to protect them, and basically becoming parentified or becoming the parent at a very young age. And this creates a really interesting dynamic where imagine you're a child and you take on the emotions of your parent, and that's the indirect version. The direct version is more like maybe you have a parent who's an addict, maybe there's abuse or violence in the home, maybe there's a lot of chaos, maybe there's parents talking to one another talking to the child about one another, saying negative things, and it's too much emotional turmoil for you to take on as a child. But the only thing that you learn to do is like, okay, well, I want to stay safe and I know I have to rely on my caregivers. So I'm just going to like release any sense of self and sense of boundaries and try to adapt to this environment by protecting my caregivers, by being 2 steps ahead of things, by becoming hypervigilant. And so love becomes this really painful and challenging thing. And your subconscious gets associations that say, I really want love, because we all really want that love and connection and closeness, but it feels enslaving or overwhelming or expectant or punishing, or maybe you have parents who violate your boundaries because they're extremely authoritarian. And so you just feel like there's this burdening all the time, or expectations are so extreme. And so as a result of any of the above circumstances, your subconscious mind has to react and adapt. So maybe it does so by becoming really strong and taking things on before maybe you were of a normal age to do so. But another thing that can happen is at the same time, your subconscious mind can go, I'm not doing this again when I get out of here. And so it's not uncommon for a fearful avoidant to develop an element of counterdependency, where as much as you want closeness and you fear that abandonment, even if it's just emotional abandonment from a partner and a disconnection taking place, you, to protect yourself, go extremely in the opposite direction and try to hyper establish independence. You want to see yourself as separate. You don't want to feel enmeshed like that again. And you fear it so deeply because of the previously stored traumas and emotional associations and pain that it has caused. And so it can create this really deep desire to avoid closeness, even though another part of you really wants it. And these things are part of what create that inborn swinging, that shift between the anxious side of you and the avoidant side of you, and that ambivalence that can take place, as if there's like sort of this pendulum swinging back and forth between those two behaviors, because you actually have natural needs and conditioned needs that are competing with one another. And that competition of needs can create friction within the psyche, and also confusion, and also fear, and also all these other challenges. And so the way that you protect yourself is to want love, to fear abandonment, but if I don't get too close, I can't be abandoned that badly. And because a part of me at a subconscious level assumes that it's inevitable that I will be abandoned or left behind, I just carve out that space and don't let myself get too close in the first place. And so the roots of this are rooted in things that are very similar to the behaviors of codependence, where it's like you're seeking control. It's rooted in distrust of other. It's rooted in fear. It's rooted in trauma or pain. It's rooted in unhealthy relationships and the rules you learned about relating. But the expression of it can be something quite opposite. So these are really important things to recognize, to become aware of, if you are in fact exhibiting counterdependent behaviors, or if those behaviors are so consistent and show up as such an integral part of your intrinsic world that it's a part of who you are. Maybe you are counterdependent at this point to a certain degree, and not who you are at your core, but who you are maybe in your personality structure. So what can you do about this? Number one, do a belief dump. Write out all of the fears you have of vulnerability, closeness, commitment, and deep connection. And even like any fears you have about relying on other people. Like, what comes up for me? Fear that I might be a burden, fear that I'll rely on people and then I can't trust them, fear that people can't do things properly, and then I'll be let down or disappointed. What fears are in there for you? And try to write out as many things as you can possibly find. And what you're actually doing is you're bringing all these subconscious belief systems to the conscious mind's surface. And then what I want you to do is start questioning these stories and looking for proof of otherwise, because the conditioned programs we have, the mind is believing that these things are absolutes, which is just not the case. And so you want to start breaking those things apart, sort of like scar tissue, by pushing up against them and really challenging them. Can I truly know that every person I ask for help from will think that I'm a burden? Do I have any evidence in my life for when I've asked for help and people are happy to help me, they're excited to support me? Or do I know any people that at least exist like that in the world? Do I have any examples of like public figures or people, role models, whoever it might be? Try to get really clear on that. And what you're doing is you're pushing up against these original conditioned beliefs. The more repetitively you do that, and the more it elicits an emotional association, the more you actually start to reprogram that entire paradigm. And so it's a really important thing to do. Another really, really important thing is to recognize that, and this is your number two here, is to recognize that the reason you do this is because you don't trust yourself to have boundaries aside from this one big boundary that you've created. And you don't know what your time boundaries are, your emotional boundaries are, your thought boundaries are. You don't know what your material boundaries are, maybe your physical or sexual boundaries. And until we're really clear about these things, and until they're a natural part of how we relate to others, we're going to fear closeness because we're going to fear engulfment. And so this is a symptom. Counterdependency is a symptom of actually fearing and distrusting our own ability to be able to set boundaries. And the healing of counterdependency largely requires working on those things at the behavioral level. So I have a huge course on this, on both codependency and boundaries, which together are like literally so effective for changing counterdependency. And again, I'll put a link here in the description, but this is really, really important and powerful work. And we all deserve love. We all deserve connection. We all deserve to have it in a healthy, interdependent way where we feel like we're free to connect with others and it feels good and empowering. And we're also empowered to meet our own needs and set boundaries and say no and take time to ourselves and really enjoy that time and love being with ourselves. So there's a whole bunch more I could say about this topic. And let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. But I hope this is useful. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in the next video.